Welcome to Garden Views, interesting conversations with interesting people who have done and or are doing interesting things. So sit back and enjoy. Welcome everyone into our first Garden Views of 2024. And in doing so, we figure we would start with our good friend, geopolitical expert, Professor Patricia DeGennaro. And so welcome to the show once again, Professor. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you? I can't believe it's 2024.
I know, right? So we've been doing this series for those of you who are new listeners on things that we need to know about. And Professor DeGennaro has been on, I don't know, this is probably the fourth, maybe fifth time. And I think one time we just spoke generally, and then we decided to sort of do this recurring series. And it's been, I'll say, a lot of fun. It's fun for us. I don't know the things we're talking about are fun. So since we last spoke, the war in Ukraine has continued. I keep hearing about Ukraine's going to run out of ammunition, but it seems like the Europeans and even Canadians have sort of stepped into the void while the U.S. gets its act together, assuming that it will. I saw something today that said that the Russian offensive, which doesn't seem like much of an offensive, to be honest, is expected to stop in the spring. Of course, last we spoke, I do believe that the war in Israel and Gaza had started. It seems like maybe it just might be nearing a conclusion, or a hiatus. I'm not sure. There was some announcement today from an Iranian-backed Iraqi group saying they'll stop attacks, which I understand is only one of many groups. And right now we and the world is waiting for a response from the Biden administration to an attack that actually killed 3 U.S. service members and injured dozens more. The Houthis continue to do their thing. They're a rebel group in Yemen. I'm not sure if they're a majority rebel group or not. They are also said to be Iranian-backed, and they're sort of battle-tested in an ongoing civil war, which lots of people have called a proxy war between the U.S. and Iran, or Saudi Arabia and Iran, or a combination of both. I don't know if there would have been a civil war otherwise. And my own near and dear country of Ecuador is under basically martial law, and Venezuela has not yet invaded British Guyana, to my knowledge. The president of Argentina actually impressed everybody on the world stage by saying some wonderful things at Davos, apparently, that everyone seems to like, which I don't know. He's an interesting fella. I don't know. I'm sure I've missed lots of other fun stuff that's going on, but I imagine that at least a few of those things made it onto your list.
Yeah, more than a few of those things.
Okay.
Definitely. I mean, on my list, obviously, is Ukraine, Gaza, and Ukraine, and all the fallout from what's happening in Gaza right now. Definitely, I'm glad you brought up some of those issues that are going on in South America, basically, because they are often ignored because, like, and I'm guilty of this right now because I'm very, very focused on what's happening in the Middle East and in Central Asia and Russia. So I just because of the work that I'm doing, I tend to be focused there. So I too tend to read about what's going on in Ecuador, where some very good friends of mine are as well, and kind of move on to the next Gaza thing. Unfortunately, that's it. And I think some of the points you brought up then with Venezuela are very important right now going on in the background. Because there's a lot going on in the background that we're not paying attention to because of the Middle East. And,
Can I ask you something about that? Because I don't know the answer to this. And I saw recently that the U.S. is going to send aid to Ecuador. And Ecuador is also near and dear. My wife's from Ecuador. my stepson, who lives here, is from Ecuador. Obviously all of her family, or most of her family anyway, is in Ecuador. But, and we have a mutual, well, I think I introduced you to him, but Mike Hilliard, I sent him a question, and he mostly answers me, and I said, do you think that South America is heading for its first continental war? And he's like, I don't think so. And then I rattled off a list of things I'm a cynic and a skeptic, or, a little bit of both. And he's like, I'm going to have to look into this a little bit more. But the question I actually have is, where's this aid coming from? Because we don't have any aid to give to Israel or Ukraine because it's tied up. I mean, my assumed answer is that each department has budgets, and some of those budgets are discretionary and they can use it. So there's maybe something in the State Department or even Defense Department or other places where there's money that was already part of the budget, not spent other places, that's allocated for Latin or South America. I'm assuming that that's the case. That's how it skirts around the Ukraine-Israel problem, or that we're just saying we're giving aid and it's more like technical support, or I don't know. But where would that aid come from, if any? And then we can certainly go back to the things that, listen, just because I have an interest in Ecuador and South America doesn't mean that the land war in Europe and the Middle East blowing up probably isn't of more immediate import to most of the world.
Yeah, probably not, but I do agree with you. I mean, the U.S. has a very close relationship with Ecuador. It's had it for a very long time. Although it's a small country, we, really supported the, democracy there and a lot of the efforts of the government and economic initiatives and the like.
They use the U.S. dollar. It's like having two more small states, with your currency being used.
Right. So, I think, part you answered part of your question. I think, every country and every part of the diplomatic effort has its own budget, and some money will come from them. But we always seem to find discretionary monies, friends of ours and allies, and you also nailed it, that basically a lot of that is where we send experts in for training and help in that way. So it's a different kind of, skirting of spending. So we're hiring people to go in, or we've already given them some funds to improve their government structures or economy, and different kind of economic processes that come from the State Department and U.S. aid and those monies. So it's not always military, so they do have budgets of their own, and they're very much more active in South America than the military. So,
and I imagine there's money that the FBI has money for law enforcement efforts, so to help them so they could send down dozens of FBI agents. Does that or does it not include tactical units? I don't know. The CIA, I'm sure, has plenty of budget for all sorts of things. And, I don't know, maybe it's just a question of, other kinds of technical advisors or experts that the money's already budgeted for, that instead of going to say, I'm just going to make up places, instead of going to Nepal and, Angola, they'll send the same budget items, experts or budgeted, paid for expertise to South America. I assume that's how that sort of works.
Yeah, absolutely. There are budgets for that. And we've been working with South America for a long time, specifically on law enforcement in those areas and trafficking, gang-related criminal violence for a long time. So a lot of those things are already in place there. And again, we do have a close relationship with Ecuador, and I assume that we'll do what we can in order to calm that situation down.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, I agree with you.
An interesting thing with the president of Argentina, his name always escapes me, and it's interesting. It's like Fonsi. What is it?
He's brand new, right? So,
right. Anyway, I I think one of his proposals is also to switch the Argentinian currency to the U.S. dollar, which, I mean, again, that's, that I don't know how many people are in Argentina, but I mean, I imagine it would be like the size of having like a Texas-sized, population using U.S. currency, which, whether that bolsters the U.S. dollar. I mean, that's more, it supports it being a fiat currency. And it,
It's particularly important because Argentina was supposed to join the BRIC nations, which are Brazil, let me get this right.
Russia, India, China.
And China, correct. Yeah. Which they invited, I think, about 7 more people to join them, or 7 more countries. He's a Trump fan, and he wants to do all things American. So that membership kind of halted right at the beginning of that. So that is an interesting dynamic considering the expansion of the BRIC nations right now. And one of the issues that they were focusing on was a different type of currency, or using US has so many restrictions on so many countries, which it just implemented on Venezuela again, another more restrictions on the oil there, because the president wouldn't agree to expanding democracy or enabling another party to run against him or to work against him. So.
Yeah, and he seems like he's using the old-fashioned theory: if nothing else is working at home, threaten war on someone else. And he picked a.
Yes, they've been doing that. Trump did it too. I mean, it's very interesting with Venezuela and some of these countries. I think it's kind of crazy because the people again are really suffering, and they're putting all of these kinds of sanctions and what have you on not only the commodities, but the financial systems as well. And so it makes it very difficult for.
Yeah, and I know it made Brazil nervous because they also border on both Venezuela and British Guyana, and they don't want that to happen. But another interesting thing listen, I'm sure by this time most of my listeners who are really, avid Trump supporters or, isolationists, maybe not, I don't want to say America first because I agree with America first. But my view of how you get there is very different than an isolationist. That besides the point is that I have read that fully 25% of the Venezuelan population now lives in the United States. So on the assumption that some portion of those are not here because they really want to be here, it's because it's bad there, and or some portion are illegal, and those are issues of yours, then you too want Venezuela to be stable because you don't want 25% of their population to be in the United States. You don't want 25% of any other country's population to be in another country. You're barely a country if you're starting to get under the 75th percentile of your citizens being in your own country. And that's just the United States. I mean, how many are in countries between the United States and Venezuela or other places?
And the actions that are happening in that regard are kind of they're counter-isolationism, right? Because we're putting sanctions and parameters on a country, like you said, that has a high rate of immigration here, people coming here. And if we use diplomacy instead of sticks, perhaps we could work through some of these problems and have less of an influx on our border. And I mean, and I'll go back to that little isolationist. I know this is kind of around around the issues in a circle, but we have to think about the policies we make in other countries and the support we give to other countries and interaction with other countries, because a lot of the repercussions of those policies and decision making do affect us, and immigration is one of those issues that we, are feeling from policies in Latin and South America that we've had over decades. And so I know that people love this isolationist idea. And I mean, I do agree that some of the interventions we do are really counterproductive. However, everything we do does affect us, and we're all connected in some way, shape, or form. We got a globalized system, and specifically in the financial markets and the trade markets. So we're kind of stuck with that. So we have to think more responsibly and logically about how to manage this if we want to do this quote unquote America first and what that means. And that doesn't mean shutting off all of our good relationships. It doesn't mean working on better relationships with adversaries, and it does not mean just kind of what is the word that I'm losing my mind here? Sorry about that. Just really trying to coerce and violently coerce others to do our bidding because we feel that we're strong enough to do that. That doesn't always work, and we're going to talk about that when we segue into the Middle East and Ukraine.
Okay, we'll segue away.
See how all these things get connected, and I mean, I think we need to remember this when we're talking about what we want to do and how we want to engage with other countries or not. And this means really, this means critical thinking. This means being able to work with other parts of our own society that we may not necessarily agree with, but we need to figure out how to do this best for all of America, not just some of America.
Right.
But I think one of the big issues with the Ukraine that I kind of wanted to bring up, because I'm sure you have some thoughts on this area, is that most recently there's been extensive talk, especially in Eastern Europe and with Ukraine, about a ceasefire or some kind of peace process. And Victor Orban, now who's the president of Hungary, has really been pushing for that and pursuing that. And the irony that we're seeing right now is that the EU is saying no.
Well, Victor Orban, I'm not sure that they consider him to be an honest broker. I mean, he seems to be but I'm not really sure about the outline of his proposal. I mean, the little that I heard about it is that basically it was the same as the Russians. We get to keep our sort of our little land bridge to Crimea, and then we'll stop the shooting. And I mean that's been on the table sort of for a while now. If that's just the opening salvo in talks, I mean nothing should be outright rejected. I mean even during a shooting war, there's usually diplomacy, but maybe you know more about it, or just because I have a negative view of Victor Orban, that does. I mean, nobody is one thing. Not even Victor Orban is one thing, and I'm sure that he has good things and bad things, and good things about the country and good things from his country's perspective that aren't necessarily the best things from another country's perspective. So yeah, go more into that and.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we need to realize and think about is that you have a whole slew of countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, many of were part of the Soviet Union, who would like to see this resolved because they don't want to be next. They don't want to worry about the extent of Russian influence that's happening and has been happening over the time of this intervention in Ukraine, and it's quite extensive. I don't think, I know that Victor Orban is very close to Putin. He's been close to Putin for a long time, but he still has his own country. And I don't think that the ongoing conflict there is helping out a tiny country like Hungary in any way, shape, or form. And I think that they're kind of, looking more for stabilization. His control, I think, is contained within his borders or his desire of control. And which is often true for many of these dictators, is they have their little fiefdoms and that's what they want to keep. And so it's just something worth, again, looking at. Now, you're right, this isn't the first time this has come up, or this idea hasn't come up, but I think my concern has been it's the EU twice now, and the United States basically have said no to diplomacy, no to peace process, no to discussions, and how much more time, money, effort, and weapons can we send in there kind of half-heartedly, which it's been from the beginning.
I mean, that part I definitely agree with you 100%, that the Ukraine has repeatedly asked for certain weapons and said no, only to 6 months later say yes. And perhaps if they got yes from the beginning, this could have hit this stalemate. And I don't want to belittle because, in my view, Russia's the bad guys. But, I mean, all of the people they're conscripting and sending to the lines aren't the bad guys. I mean, they're just walking into machine gun fire, basically. I mean, the estimates are anywhere from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of Russian men, some of which are probably 16, and some of which are probably in their 60s, including emptying out the prisons and, putting them into meat grinders, basically. But the one thing that was absent in our conversation right now is we're saying the United States has said no, the EU has said no, Hungary has said yes. But, I mean, I don't want to be U.S. centered or even EU centered. I mean, shouldn't it be up to Ukraine to say whether yes or no they're willing to talk? And Russia, of course, as well. I mean, but Russia sort of indicated it's willing to talk for a while. I mean, its terms may not be acceptable. That doesn't mean you're not talking. I mean, I'm sure that before the Berlin Wall fell down there, the talks didn't start at, okay, we'll knock down the wall and we're going to integrate East Germany into West Germany and everyone's going to be happy. I mean, for one, the Germans weren't so thrilled about that for a long time. I'm old enough to remember that very well. But right, yeah, right. You were there, right? It's part of that time.
I was not there when the wall fell, but I was definitely in Eastern Europe directly after, and I was there for quite some time, watching the aftermath of the fall of the Soviet Union and the rise of many countries we have now instead of one.
I mean, I get that the EU and the US feels like it has a vote in it because the EU and the US and other places. I mean, not just Canada, NATO, Australia. I mean, even South Korea and Japan. I mean, other countries are contributing as well. And when they contribute millions and billions of their treasure and hardware, they feel like they have a seat at the table. But I don't know that going back to the American Revolution, I don't know that the French got to tell the colonists when to start talking peace with the British. Now, the French probably would have been happy enough to let us shoot at Brits, until now, probably.
The point here is, we're definitely here in the United States having large discussions on whether or not we should continue to provide aid to the Ukraine. I mean, that's all going through Congress right now. And that's stuck on this immigration bill, talk about things that are all connected, right? So a lot of that is stuck within this kind of negotiation. And so we're part of the issue I think I have is that we're telling the Ukrainians and Zelensky that they need to keep fighting. We don't care if they say yes or no, because we really haven't heard, right, from them. Zelensky's been going around asking for more aid, telling the U.S. and the European Union basically that he is not going to be able to sustain the fight much longer. And they're all like, well, I don't know if we're going to give you money yet. And our Congress is just totally ineffective. So they're fighting about whether or not they want to continue to give aid. And so where do you take it from there? Do you tell people to keep fighting without support now?
Well, my understanding is that they're going to fight to the last bullet anyway, but maybe my understanding is incorrect. I mean, I've never heard anyone out of Ukraine, or at least the government, say, it's time to talk. We should talk about. I mean, I've heard we want all our land back, and that includes the entire Crimean Peninsula.
And all of you to give me weapons and money, and it's so I can do that.
Well, sure.
I think that's going to be hard because not only are they, and I mean, you brought up this point about the Russian men, but not only all the Russian men are dying, but so are the Ukrainians. And so, where are you a better partner? And I mean, this is a good discussion. When are we better partners when we say, you know what, I think enough is enough right now, and I think we need to talk about how to get out of this. But it's interesting too because we discussed this, I think, last time I was on about how far Putin would really go and how far he thinks that West is going to go or would go, and he really doesn't need to move one way or the other until there's some kind of push, from a lot of entities that are telling him to do so, and I think China has to be one of those, but that still remains to be seen because China stayed out of it until this particular point.
Want to hear sort of a strange theory I have? I'm not sure if it's so much a theory or a side thought, but I mean, obviously I think that, I remember that during the Iranian hostage crisis, it was during the Carter administration, and then Reagan won the election, and basically like 2 or 3 days into Reagan's term, the Iranians said, okay, you can have your hostages back. And, obviously I'm not here to defend or slam Carter. And, by the way, in 1980, I was probably 12 years old. So I'm not sure that I really know the answer. But, obviously that was to get out of the situation, but not give Carter the win. And why am I talking about this? Because in a perverse way, I mean, everyone knows how I feel about Donald Trump. But I actually think that and I'm not trying to get anyone to change their votes or to vote for him, but if he actually won the election, I half believe, maybe more than half believe, that Putin would say, okay, well, now that President Trump's here and he doesn't want me to be doing this, let's talk. I'm willing to pull out of those lands, not Crimea, but, basically go back to 2014, borders such as they are. And it would give Trump the win. And he'd say, see, I told you this wouldn't have happened without me. But Putin gets to save face because he's saying he's doing it on his terms because now he can work in this world order with his friend. And, it's mostly, excuse my French, bullshit. But, and I surely hope that we never see that, because I don't want that be our path of going forward, of what would become history. Can history go in both directions? Our future. But I would be interested in being like the Watcher from the Marvel universe, where I could see alternate multiverses and timelines and see if that theory would bear fruit.
I mean, that's free will and all, right? That's free will and all. But yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point, and people know how I feel about Trump, and it's not very good. But I will be quite honest with you. I'm pretty tired of war, and I think that we need to have a leader. I'm not sure that it's Trump, but we need to find we need to find a new leader in this country, and somebody who has enough courage, political courage, enough gumption, enough self-confidence, and all of those things to give us kind of a different way to think about engaging. And Eisenhower said it, we're going to be relying on the military-industrial complex, and we are way past that. And I think we need and we don't need a strong military. I just think we have a lot of waste there, a lot of money there that can be put in other avenues and venues to make us strong again in research development and healthcare, any of these things. So we're not a one-trick pony. That just came to my mind. How about that? And I feel like that's kind of what we've become internationally. It's always like, if you're not doing this, we're going to send warships. If you're not doing this, we're going to send bombs. If you're not doing this, we'll send some bombs to other people to help us. And it's kind of, I think that America has suffered from that. We've suffered from a lot of losses from Vietnam, Korea, to Iraq, Afghanistan. We continue to do that. We're not in Afghanistan anymore, but that doesn't mean we didn't spend $1 trillion. It could have been spent much better. And we're someone who really had a plan and a vision. and I think that's where we're gone from. We really strayed from a vision of what we're going to be and how we're going to be in the world, except, violence. Violence has been the choice, and I think America is going to continue to suffer long term for that. I think we need to think about other ways to make our country strong, and invest in people, invest in its people in a good way. So.
Well, one thing that we have learned is apparently the Russian conventional military isn't the juggernaut that everybody thought it was. It was sort of closer to what the cynics were saying, that they have a lot of stuff, but it's not maintained, and a lot of it doesn't work, and the training isn't good, and they don't have the rank of sergeant, which, is a giant divide of lack of leadership, in the trenches, and to make those decisions. It seemed to be.
I'll tell you a little story.
Sure.
I would love just really quickly on that issue. When I went to Eastern Europe right in the early 90s, I grew up in the Cold War. I was like, oh my God, the Russians, they're all going to be. So when I got to Eastern Europe, I was laughing because here I see these armies and the military, they don't have boots, they don't have ammunition, they have shoddy, materials, even their uniforms. They were walking around in sandals, and I was like, what? We were afraid of these people?
Right.
You gotta be kidding me, right? And they were pretty beat up considering how they had to live under Russian, occupation. And so it was just the mere heart and will of the people to do anything but, try to live in some freedom was a big surprise to me. And I was also very surprised of the hospitality and warmth that they, had given me and when I came there. And so having this whole, block of time where this notion of fear of the other overtook us so much, and having, gotten there and learned differently, I still think that, that is part of the reason, I guess, that, I feel that there are ways to engage with other people than purely, twisting arms and using guns instead of maybe some carrots. all my professors used to say carrots and sticks, and I always hated that because I was like, no, life is not carrots and sticks. Life is a lot more complicated, and people are a lot more complicated. So I think we need to think much broader and understand, more what benefits societies and what helps populations become something more stable. And our goal in the world from the beginning was finding ways to increase our economic power. And so I think that, increasing our economic power is a really good way to look at things, and helping others to also, get that dream of being able to have a better life.
Yeah, I too am a Cold War kid. I mean, of course, Red Dawn the day after, remember it all well. Cuban soldiers all over the place. I mean, growing up, I'm like, how many hundreds of millions of people must live in Cuba that they've got these soldiers all over the place? And now I think back, it's like, those poor Cubans. I mean, they got like almost nothing out of it. And there's still sort of, quasi holding on to that. But I am taking, I fully accept that I'm probably brainwashed by my own, what I was raised amongst and what I was raised with. So, but I am taking a lot of the cues from sort of like the Baltic states and, sort of Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, how, basically Poland was becoming, Orban 2, or maybe Orban 1. And all of a sudden they're like, we're, we're turning this ship around and we're pointing all of our tanks that way. And then, little, peaceful, happy, Finland and Sweden now joining NATO, and Turkey, recently, withheld their objections and now agreed to Sweden. I mean, most people knew that it was going to happen, but it took longer than I thought. So I'm taking my cues from, basically Russia's neighbors. They certainly don't take it lightly.
So they don't take it lightly. They don't take it lightly at all. Neither do the Central Asian states. I mean, you're talking about Kazakhstan and, these guys who are all worried that Russia's going to they're going to be next. And I mean, I'm not sure how that would happen because the basic resource issue, but they still fear it, first of all, and obviously rhetoric is enough sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
The Russians just have to say a couple things, and all of a sudden the Kazakhs are like, okay, let's just.
It's true, but I spoke to someone else about that as well, and they were saying, well, the Kazakhs, and some of these stands, they sort of have to play a delicate game between Russia and China and even India, and so they're trying to build their economies, and so the best way is to see the best they can get. I think the thing with Russia and is that, I mean, one, they might have learned some lesson from Afghanistan. Like, I think their main goal is to find better routes to bigger bodies of water. And you're not going to do that through Central Asia. So, but that doesn't mean that this stand shouldn't be worried, or maybe, or maybe they know of assets that we don't know about, or, maybe natural gas is enough to rebuild the economy. I don't know, but that's sort of where I was taking my cues, was from those reactions. Even like in the beginning, Belarus was like a big threat, but I don't think I've heard a thing about Belarus for like 8 months. And I know it's a small little country, but they could have allowed Russia to, let 20,000 troops, come in from there. And I think in the beginning they probably did, but I mean, their ground has been sort of, limited. And so was, what's the country that's like, it's part of Moldova, but it's not part of Moldova. Is it Transnistria? Yeah, there's a couple of those. Like they was worried that those would be staging areas, and I think they were at some point, but they're really not any longer. Like, all of that's quieted down, which to me are signs of a slow, painful Russian defeat, which again feeds into my Trump thing, because I don't know that Putin really has that much animus towards Biden personally, but I think he's very much a pride person, and to say, this is my friend Donald Trump, that, and then feel like he has, an ally, a friend, a friendly face, there, that would be better. Anyway, enough of my.
It is true. I mean, we've kind of had this history where, and this has been my big gripe over my career, is that, again, I'm going to go back to vision, right? We've had a foreign policy that's been in place for as long as we can remember, which is what I'm winking at you. It's a really long time.
It's getting there.
And it hasn't changed. It really hasn't changed much. And I mean, I think it started to change a little bit once the Berlin Wall fell down, and Gorbachev and, Reagan and some of these guys got together and Bush won. But that all that stuff started to fall apart, and I'm not sure, and that tends to make people feel more comfortable about falling back into a policy that's outdated, right? So now everybody's still continuing, we're back in this Cold War, right? And Russia's starting to do these things again, and so it's easy for them to fall back into that normal American, Russia's the enemy kind of thing. And in a way, Putin's like, hey man, I thought we were all going to be friends, and now you're all starting this over again. And so I'm going to test some of the borders here. And we just have to get smarter about making change. And I don't think that change is, knocking people over the head. I think it's really finding a vision for this country and being able to work with people who can understand a lot of moving parts at the same time. I mean, when you have a Cold War, you have East-West. East-West you know, and we overthrow any government we don't like. But I mean, that kind of has to stop at this point. We have too many players. We have too many equal playing fields. There's too many different dynamics going on, and it's too easy for people to get corrupt. You know, we see that.
I am a little bit surprised that given the state of things that there hasn't been sort of like this, Avengers of special envoys, that you haven't had like, a delegation from Ukraine, a delegation from Russia, a delegation from NATO, a delegation from the EU, a delegation from the UN, a delegation from the US, which could be part of NATO as well. And, in any other, group, the whatever the Pacific group is, even BRIC, they all said that, they all got this.
If Baker were Secretary of State, we'd be having all these things going on. And plus, the Israelis would probably have to sit down by now. Yeah,
well, Jim Baker was a much tougher, it was a, pill to swallow. But yeah, and like, when they were at Davos, just they all stay for an extra, 3 weeks, how horrible, stay in Davos. Oh no. And try to hammer some of these things out. So I don't know. That's my suggestion. Everything has to come back to comics or wrestling. So the Avengers are special envoys, and they all meet and see if they can come up with anything. I
love it. I think that's part of, how maybe we have to think about diplomacy now. Diplomacy is not walking into a European townhouse having a martini anymore. It's really getting a diverse group of people trying to solve problems that are large and need a lot of different type of skills and thought processes. I'd love to save the world by myself, but I can't do it. I'd love to build a car by myself too, but I can't do it. So I need somebody to help me, with plumbing, electricity. If I'm gonna, I just renovated my house a while ago. I couldn't do the plumbing or the electricity.
But everything else you did. You did the floors, the walls, opened up the kitchen plan, all of that.
I know. So, I got to build a house. I need help doing it. I can have the idea for what I want it to look like at the end, and what I need for kinds of, members that have different skills and abilities, and bring them together and they think. They think about how to solve problems and how to get the bad guy and make the good guys win. I don't know, but this is, I really like that idea. And I think that.
A long time ago, it was what the UN was supposed to be.
Yeah. And the State Department.
Well, sure.
But we have lost our way, I'm telling you. We don't want to give money to the UN. We don't want to give money to the State Department.
Well, I wouldn't go for the UN right now because it was just discovered by the rest of the world. It was sort of known by certain people that you have this one the UN has a giant refugee organization, but they had one dedicated to Gaza, and apparently fully 20% of them.
We don't know this. This is alleged still. We don't know the truth about this yet. So
well, my good friends at Commentary Magazine say we know it. So
no, I would disagree. Only because I've been there enough times to see things happen. So.
All right, well, let's get off of that side issue, and which is part of. Not side issue, but small part of the giant meal that is what's going on in the Middle East, and most notably, Israel and its southern and northern border, but mostly it's southern.
All of these things too. That and the reason I think I'm going to go back to this. We need to get together and have a vision and decide what kind of Avengers we need to bring on board, and how many we need this week, and who needs to come in next week, and. Is because if you're looking at the world right now, it's a pretty scary place, and it's tomorrow one false move, and we can all be kissing our Avenger, goodbye, because a lot of people have a lot of pretty nasty weapons out there, and if you start going off, I hesitate to think who's going to be, who's going to call stop.
I guess the good and the bad of being a Cold War kid is that that's my entire mentality is always that one bad move and it's all over. So, at some point, that just became my reality. So I guess it doesn't scare the hell out of me like it did when I was 16.
Well, that's because we're older and we have less time left. This is
Well, also we've seen enough.
All of these things to do, and all of these, girls, I'm sure, that were in your future. So.
Well, yeah, of course, the scores and scores of them, of course.
You're never gonna die.
Yeah, legions, of course. Yes, but we can't talk about that's a different show. No, but we've also seen enormous things happen, and the whole place didn't go boom. So, I mean, there is something about there's a difference between an issue. There's a difference between an issue and a problem, and there's a difference between a problem and a crisis. And and then there's a difference between a crisis and a catastrophe as well. And I'm not sure that the younger generations quite get that, but I'm not sure that my view is good either, because it seems to be like, seen this before, we'll get through it. We're not all going to go boom. And
I mean that's a good way to think about it. I think, but before it was. The U.S. and Russia, or the U.S. and the Soviet Union, because it was the Soviet Union.
Yes, right.
So they had, nuclear weapons. We had nuclear weapons, and never the twain shall meet. We all both knew there was mutual destruction. Now it's about a lot of other people having nuclear weapons, and also, knowing how to use them, and we. And I do think there is something to be said about people not wanting to destroy the earth. I think everybody right now is really, really concerned about escalation of this conflict in the Middle East. But at the same time, there's always these days either.
There was a little bit of lag there. I'm going to suggest you turn off your camera and then come back, because I think maybe the bandwidth will help things.
That.
Perfect. Okay, so you can just repeat whatever your point just was about the mutual assured destruction and tying it into the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, basically, to your point, when we were younger, there were two countries that had nuclear weapons and had mutually assured destruction, and we both knew it, and we both were very I would say active diplomatically, although we didn't always. Rhetorically, there was not the rhetoric there that really gave either of our populations that comfort. The U.S., we had a red phone, and anytime Kennedy could get on the phone, and all of this with his Russian or Soviet counterpart. And today, we have a lot of nations that also have nuclear weapons. Some have admitted it, others have not.
Right.
And we don't have a lot of red phones that we can pick up at any time, and because we've looked at things, I think, a little differently, whereas although the Soviet Union was the ultimate enemy of the Avengers, now we have other people who we just have made the decision not to speak with. Okay, so I know there are back channels with Iran every day. There are, but they go through other countries as well. They are not direct.
Right.
So, in that context, we're playing with a little bit more of uncertainty than we did in those days when we were younger. And I'm just going to say, I know I was cuter then. Maybe a little thinner.
Yeah.
There was days it was us and them. Now it's not us and them anymore. It's us and China and Russia and Iran. And, Israelis have nuclear weapons, although they don't want to talk about it. And and they're out there. So.
Yeah, but they don't want to talk about it, but they wink.
They wink.
Because they sort of want you to know that they do have it.
Yes, they do. I've seen cadets do a skit on that was very cute. It's like, yes, no, we really don't have them.
Right. So what are your thoughts about the escalation risks? I mean, I know that's an enormous question, but do you think that the Iraq group was sort of acting alone, or do you think it's the first wave of showing that of Iran saying, okay, we maybe we went too far, and maybe we really don't want this to go further, or is it just don't take it any more than this group doesn't want to be bombed?
Well, let me put it this way. I've been in the Middle East since the early 80s. Okay? I was at the Madrid Peace Conference. I've been doing this. I've been working on the Middle East and those issues for a very long time. So nothing is always as black and white as it seems. So we can sit here and say Iranian-backed so-and-so, Iranian-backed so-and-so. But it's not that clear. Perhaps they get money from Iran or some weapons from Iran, but that doesn't mean Iran controls their every move. And they are also Iraqis, so they have different interests that they would like to work toward. So that all falls into the equation. I mean, part of the good and bad that we're seeing, we helped train some of these militia groups because they helped us fight ISIS. So
right.
Now you're having Iranian-funded American trained. Oh my goodness, that's really a pair to put together. But these groups make decisions and pretty much act in their own interest and what they think is their interest, and sometimes they may not always be sure.
Then again, the American training thing, I'm not sure it holds as much as it used to, and that's because the Iraqi armed forces, the Afghani armed forces, the armed forces in Chad. I mean, it doesn't seem like the training has done what it used to do.
Oh, it does what it used to do in a lot of ways. I mean, people you learn how to maneuver. They learn how to use different types of weapons. They learn how to command and control. They learn how to work in different types of groups and teams. So it does make a difference in how they operate or tactically operate on the ground.
All right, I'll cede that point.
Well, we do it. So just like, but So we're in a bit of a quagmire here, right? Because we have not only the U.S., but you have several countries in the Middle East who have quote-unquote proxy forces that are supposed to be working in their interests, but it's just if I'm an Iraqi, I may be working for some other, maybe I'm just doing this so I can get some money. Maybe I'm doing this because I want the U.S. troops out. Maybe I'm doing this because I want the Shiites to stay in power or the Sunnis. So there's a lot of reasons that people are not always that simple, right? So
what you're saying is that the Iranian control of these various groups is overstated, much like people say Israel doesn't do anything with the United States' approval, which is clearly not true.
It's clearly not true. Otherwise, they would stop bombing Gaza by now.
Right.
But we've given them the weapons to bomb Gaza, so they're using them. There's all these contradictions that you're looking at, and so it's sometimes, like I said, everything is not black and white anywhere, let alone some of these very complicated environments.
Well, at some point, earlier in the show, when I was doing my opening monologue, we'll just call it, I was saying it seems like there might be indication that this war itself might be coming to an end, or at least an end of a phase. And you were making a face like, somewhere between you ate bad fish and, or you had something that was definitely too spicy. So obviously you were not agreeing with that. So what's your take on the situation?
I just think that Israelis have gotten themselves into a mental state that they are not going to let this rest until Palestinians are either dead or gone.
I guess I should say something now. I don't know. I mean, I mean, I don't think it's any mystery as to what my upbringing here is. And, I'm sympathetic to it. I'm not in favor of mass exterminations, but if your neighbors refuse to live with you and the charter of their actual government is to destroy you, and you have people chanting from the river to the sea, I mean, sometimes it is us or them.
I think that's unfair because it goes both ways. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And, I mean, the Israelis used to say from the Nile to the Euphrates, so that's a big piece of land. And I have never heard them stop saying that. So it's really not fair.
Well, fair enough, because I've never heard that. So that's news to me. And I believe you. That is certainly not something that I would support, not even a little bit.
And you'll hear it said now, especially because like I said, a lot of this euphoria has come in where there's chanting about now we're going to take over Lebanon and we're going to get
No, leave Lebanon alone. I guess that's my editorial: is leave Lebanon alone. Yeah. I mean, if you need to defend yourself against Hezbollah, sure, but leave Lebanon alone.
Well, unfortunately, what we're seeing here is a lot of the extremists and a lot of the very right side has, they've always been a small part of the Knesset forever. It's been very difficult for the Israelis who have, like, Yitzhak Rabin and these guys who have wanted to see peace because they've had this small, really right-wing contingency in the Knesset who's made it very difficult for them over the years. But that particular, right-wing extremism has taken over. So now you have all of these guys who are like, just kill them all. And and I think sometime they're gonna like.
Hope we didn't lose you.
No, I mean.
Oh, there you are. Okay, good. I was thinking about something stupid. I think I'm not going to say it because I came up with a better rhyme than from the Nile to the Euphrates because it's out of line. But I don't even want to do something more quippy because I don't want it to catch on. All right. So if what I'm hearing is you basically feel the same way about that situation as you do about Russia, Ukraine. Some people need to, just be ready to talk a little bit more and shoot a little bit less.
Well, I hate to say this, but somebody made a decision one day to colonialize this particular area, and they picked a bad neighborhood for themselves. So now they're still dealing with it. Now, if they engaged in a different way, I think this would have turned out much different.
Well, I mean, you can argue about who colonialized who, depending on how far back you want to go. But that's it's a.
Well, there's a difference between all of the influx from Russia and Eastern Europe, and all of these guys now who all are in power right now, mostly are from Eastern Europe and Russia, right? If you look at their histories, and there's a difference between a large Jewish contingency which was there, which were all Semitic people, like Palestinians are Semitic people, Christians there are Semitic people. It's the same language, similar languages, similar background, cousins, descendants. There's a difference.
Yeah, no, I mean that part is true, and actually there's two interesting points, at least two interesting to me. So about 2 years ago, I actually did a show. It never got published, not because I didn't want it to, but because my producer who produced this one show lost it. But basically the show was I spoke to an Israeli Arab and an Israeli Jew together and interviewed them on what the situation was. And then the Israeli Arab identified as an Israeli Arab, and apparently like 2/3 do. They're Israelis first, and they get along pretty well. And I really wish I still had that show or ever had it, because I would reissue it, because it is sort of a message of hope. But the other thing is, and this is not just limited to Israel, but I've met a lot of people from former, Soviet bloc countries, but also other tough countries like apartheid South Africa, other places where there were sort of, and even people from Venezuela under Maduro and Chavez and some of those folks. And while they are here in the U.S. and they like freedom, they are a little bit they're a little bit right wing. I mean, some of that police state gets wired into you, and we're here in the United States. We're always trying to strike the balance between law and order, chaos and freedom, and we're never getting it right. And I don't know that we'll ever exactly get it right. But people who come from those states, even though they left for freedom, I feel like they still are like 2/3 order, what 1/3 freedom, which was more than 96% order and 4% freedom. But so that's an interesting point. And I don't know if that's been your experience also, but maybe that does explain some of the, we'll just call it the Ashkenazic impact.
Well, my experience with that is usually with the older generation. The older generations want more of a controlled environment because they see the chaos. The younger generations don't. They don't want anything. They want new lives. They want to be able to have freedom of movement. They want to be able to vote. They want to be able to put a stop sign up if there's a dangerous corner. They want to be able to participate in their state and have some control. When I was in Eastern Europe, it's usually the older generation, and you still have like Orban. Some of these guys are still the older generation.
Right.
So those are the ones that usually want the control or want the place to stay the way it has been. The garbage wasn't on the floor. Things like this will come to their, this is what they will talk about. And so I would say that's probably, it's true to some degree. But again, I think it's older generations who don't want to change and are fearful of what they're seeing because of the change that they're witnessing. Probably no different than my grandfather was like, what do you want to go to Europe for? Stay home. We all came from Europe,
Probably. So let's talk about obviously the most important issue on Earth right now, and that is the obvious psyop that's being taken place between Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and how they're trying to take over the world through football and pop music.
I know. Can you believe it? Wow, I should have thought of that.
If only I knew that the tight end that looked like a rapper and a pop singer who isn't the girl next door, but is what everyone envisions the girl next door to be, unified.
Loved by all teenagers in America and around the world.
Yeah. So what is their actual reptilian agenda?
I just think it's to have fun.
Oh, okay.
It's being misinterpreted.
Well, then maybe we've gotten everything about reptiles wrong. So, okay.
But I was also going to tell you one more thing that's very important, that Elton John won the Gershwin Award.
Well, clearly that's important. Sure.
And Bernie, and his partner Bernie for writing their song. So this is a very important, yes. It's right up there with Taylor Swift. I'm not a Swiftie, so.
No, clearly, you're a Johnny or an Eltonoid or whatever.
I love Elton John. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And where are you on the Barbie snubbing of the director and Margot Robbie?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. All right. I am too, because I don't care about movies or the Oscars, though I understand that people in the industry obviously do because it's important to them. But as far as the director, I have no idea. Saw the movie, thought it was clever, thought it was original. Margot Robbie is in a small upper echelon of actual movie stars. So she'll be fine. All right. Well, obviously we didn't solve the world's problems, but
not a Swift fan, so I don't know what I can do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. Until you get on board with the Kansas City Chiefs and Taylor Swift movement, you're just doomed to be a San Francisco 49er. And I mean, mining is not a great career for the people generally. I mean, it's a job and it pays, but mining is a finite resource and leads to black lung disease and cave-ins and stuff. So
all kinds of things.
All kinds of terrible things. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm gonna launch an investigation into this whole thing because apparently I learned today that it's a really big deal and it's a psyop and it's apparently funded by the Pentagon, which I think would probably be news to both Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and probably to everyone. But okay, I did want to end on a lighter note. What's that?
Americans do love their football.
and pop music, sure. I mean, of course. So it's a very powerful.
She was the next Michael Jackson. So
yeah, could be. Except I'm not sure that we're allowed to talk about Michael Jackson in a positive light any longer, given the hindsight. But yeah, I did want to end on a less serious note, or is it? Dun dun dun. Okay, so. If people want to, if you want to be found and followed, where can people find and follow you?
On my website or on Twitter. On Twitter now known as X. It's Trisha's Take and Trisha@gmail.com.
Okay, very good. Was there anything that is critical that we didn't even mention?
Absolutely not. I think wrapping it up with Taylor Swift and football is. I'm finished there.
Okay, perfect. Me too. All right, so folks, thanks for listening. Taylor, we didn't mean it. We were joking. Travis, I don't really care about you. So anyway, thanks for listening to Garden Views. Check out the sister show or cousin show, Garden of Doom. And you should certainly check out the prior shows with Professor DeGennaro, especially the ones where I actually list her credentials, because I didn't do it this time. So obviously you need to go back and listen to those, and because I read them off quite well. I think in one of the show notes I actually printed them in there. I cut and pasted them there. And give us a rating and review, refer us to your friends, and you'll certainly hear from the Garden of Doom weekly. Garden Views, as I said, I'm not committed to doing it weekly like I went crazy in 2023, but it will be at least monthly, or every 2 weeks. And so, you only need to subscribe to Garden of Doom and you'll get them both. So thank you for listening. Thank you to our guests. Thank you. I can call you Trish. Thank you, Trish. And we'll hear from you again probably in another couple months.